Please, give me a chance. I will love you forever." The desperate cry echoes through the grand negotiation chamber, stunning Randy Tucker into momentary silence. The human diplomat stands frozen at the entrance, his carefully rehearsed peace proposal forgotten as he takes in the unexpected scene before him. A stunningly beautiful saurian female, scales shimmering in iridescent hues, struggles against the grip of two burly guards. Her eyes, vertical slits of amber, lock onto Randy with an intensity that sends a shiver down his spine. This must be Yuna, he realizes, the name on everyone's lips since his arrival on the saurian homeworld. The High Council members, a row of stern reptilian faces, shift uneasily in their seats. Their tails twitch with agitation, a clear sign of the diplomatic disaster unfolding. Randy's mind races. 5 years of brutal interstellar war have led to this moment, and now, in an instant, it teeters on the edge of chaos. Yuna breaks free from her captors, scales flashing as she darts across the polished floor. Before Randy can react, she throws herself into his arms. The scent of alien spices fills his nostrils as she presses against him, her scales cool and smooth against his skin. "I love you," she whispers fiercely. "You and all of humanity. We must have peace." Security forces converge, ripping Yuna away. Her claws leave light scratches on Randy's arms as she's dragged backward, still professing her devotion to him and the human race. Randy stands rooted to the spot, heart pounding, acutely aware of the weight of every eye in the chamber upon him. The High Council rises as one, reptilian faces contorted with rage. "Explain yourself, human!" the lead counselor hisses, forked tongue flicking out in agitation. Randy opens his mouth to speak, but words fail him. His carefully planned speech lies in tatters, replaced by a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Attraction, confusion, and a desperate need to salvage the situation war within him. A commotion at the far end of the chamber draws his attention. Several saurian military leaders enter, their ornate battle armor clanking ominously. They huddle together, speaking in hushed tones, but Randy's enhanced translator picks up fragments of their conversation. "Strike against Earth. Time to end this. Show the humans our true might." Cold dread settles in Randy's stomach. The stakes have just risen exponentially. No longer is this simply about ending a war. Now, the very existence of humanity hangs in the balance. He looks from the furious council to the military leaders, then to the door through which Yuna was dragged. In her passionate outburst, she had inadvertently handed him a wild card. But would playing it save humanity or doom them all? Randy takes a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. The fate of two species rests on what he says next. As he steps forward to address the council, he knows that his words will either usher in a new era of interstellar cooperation or reignite the flames of a war that threatens to consume them all. The chamber falls silent, waiting. Randy opens his mouth to speak, the weight of worlds on his tongue. "Members of the High Council," Randy began, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling around him. "I stand before you not just as a human diplomat, but as a bridge between our species. The events of today have shown us that there is a deep, untapped desire for peace and understanding on both sides." He paused, scanning the room. The counselors' scales rippled with a mix of emotions, while the military leaders tensed, hands hovering near their weapons. "I propose a radical solution," Randy continued, "a cultural exchange program. Select individuals from both our species would live among the other for an extended period. I volunteer myself as the first human participant, ready to immerse myself in saurian society." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of hisses and growls. The lead counselor raised a clawed hand, silencing the room. "An intriguing proposal, human. But how can we trust you?" Before Randy could respond, the doors burst open. A breathless aide rushed in, scales flushed with excitement. "Honored Council, reports are flooding in from across the planet. Citizens are rallying in support of peace and interspecies harmony. They're calling it the Yuna movement." The counselors exchanged glances, their tails twitching with uncertainty. The military leaders huddled together, their whispers growing heated. Randy seized the moment. "This is our chance. Let me stay on your world as a gesture of good faith. I'll learn your ways, share our culture, and together we can build a lasting peace. After a tense deliberation, the lead counselor nodded. Very well, human. We accept your proposal on the condition that you remain here under our supervision. As the council adjourned, Randy was escorted to temporary quarters within the diplomatic complex. The room was a blend of alien and familiar, curved walls reminiscent of a reptile's den, but furnished with items meant to approximate human comforts. Randy had barely settled in when his comm unit buzzed with an encrypted message from Earth. His blood ran cold as he read the contents. A team of human special forces was en route to extract him, believing the peace talks to be a trap. "Damn it," he muttered, pacing the room. He had to find a way to call off the extraction without alerting the Saurians and jeopardizing everything he'd just accomplished. As night fell, Randy sat at his desk, drafting and redrafting messages to Earth Command. A sudden commotion outside his door made him freeze. He crept to the entrance, heart pounding, and peered out. There, in the dimly lit corridor, stood Yuna. Her scales were dull with exhaustion, her eyes wide with fear. "Please," she whispered, "I need your help. They'll kill me for what I've done." Randy hesitated, his mind racing. Harboring Yuna could destroy the fragile peace he'd brokered, but as he looked into her eyes, he saw not just an alien, but a kindred spirit who'd risked everything for the same cause he believed in. With a quick glance down the empty hallway, Randy ushered Yuna inside. "Stay quiet," he warned. "If they find you here, we're both dead." As Yuna sank gratefully onto a chair, Randy's comm unit buzzed again. The extraction team was closing in. He had mere hours to prevent a disaster that could reignite the war. Randy looked from the comm unit to Yuna, then back again. An idea began to form. Risky, potentially catastrophic, but with the potential to change everything. "Yuna," he said softly, "I need you to tell me everything you know about Saurian culture. And quickly." As Yuna began to speak, her voice low and urgent, Randy felt the weight of two worlds on his shoulders. With the clock ticking and danger approaching from all sides, he knew that the next few hours would determine the fate of both their species. Outside, the alien moons cast long shadows across the Saurian capital. In the distance, the chants of peace protesters mingled with the ominous rumble of military vehicles. The night was alive with possibility and peril, and at its center, a human and a Saurian worked together, racing against time to forge a new future. The alien moons had barely begun their descent when Randy's comm unit buzzed again, its urgent tone cutting through the tense silence of his quarters. Yuna's eyes widened, her scales shifting to a pale shade that Randy was beginning to recognize as fear. "It's the extraction team," Randy muttered, scanning the encrypted message. His heart raced as he read their demands for an immediate response to coordinate the rescue operation. The human operatives were closing in fast, unaware of the delicate peace Randy had brokered. Randy's mind whirled. He couldn't let the extraction team jeopardize everything, but alerting the Saurians would destroy the fragile trust he'd built. With a deep breath, he made his decision. "Yuna, I need you to stay absolutely silent," he whispered, moving to his computer terminal. His fingers flew over the keys as he accessed his diplomatic codes, delving deep into the extraction team's systems. "What are you doing?" Yuna asked, her voice barely audible. "Saving both our species from another war," Randy replied grimly. With a final keystroke, he disabled the extraction team's cloaking technology. Almost immediately, his comm unit lit up with frantic messages from the human operatives, reporting that they'd been exposed to Saurian scanners. Randy watched the extraction team's tracker on his screen, heart in his throat as the blip representing their ship veered away from the Saurian capital. They'd aborted the mission, narrowly avoiding detection by Saurian patrols. A wave of relief washed over him, followed quickly by dread as alarms began blaring throughout the diplomatic complex. The Saurians had detected the brief presence of an unidentified vessel. "They're searching for me," Yuna said, her scales now a mottled pattern of fear and persistence. "I need to leave before they find me here." Randy shook his head. "No, they'll catch you for sure. We need to hide you." His eyes darted around the room, landing on a barely visible seam in the wall. "There," he said, moving towards it. "The ventilation system. It's our only chance." Working quickly, Randy pried open the concealed panel, revealing a dark, narrow passage. Yuna hesitated for only a moment before slithering inside, her lithe form disappearing into the shadows. "I'll come back for you as soon as I can," Randy promised, securing the panel just as heavy footsteps approached his door. The next hours passed in a blur of interrogations and tense meetings. Randy found himself standing before the Saurian High Council, their reptilian faces etched with suspicion. "Explain this incursion, human," the lead counselor demanded, tail lashing angrily. Randy took a steadying breath. "Honored Council, I assure you that if a human ship entered your airspace, it was not authorized by Earth Command. In fact, I propose we form a joint human-Saurian task force to investigate such incidents. It would be an excellent opportunity to integrate our military operations and build trust." The counselors exchanged glances, their scales shimmering with a mix of skepticism and interest. After a heated debate in their sibilant language, the lead counselor turned back to Randy. "We will consider your proposal, human, but know that you will be under stricter monitoring from now on." Randy nodded, relief and worry warring within him. As he was escorted back to his quarters, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a trap. His suspicions were confirmed when he entered his room. Everything had been meticulously searched, items slightly out of place in a way only he would notice. Randy maintained his composure, methodically tidying up while scanning for any new surveillance devices. As night fell, Randy feigned sleep while his mind raced. He needed to check on Yuna, but he couldn't risk exposing her hiding place. Just as he was about to risk a whispered communication, a knock at his door froze him in place. "Human Tucker?" a familiar voice called. "I must speak with you urgently." Randy opened the door to find Cax, one of Yuna's most vocal critics from the High Council. The Saurian scales were flushed, his breathing labored. "May I enter?" Cax asked, eyes darting nervously down the corridor. Randy hesitated, then stepped aside. As soon as the door closed, Cax began speaking in low, urgent tones. "I know you're hiding Yuna," he said, holding up a clawed hand to forestall Randy's denial. "And I'm here to help. Her life is in danger. There are factions within our society who want to eliminate her, to reignite the war with humans." Randy's mind reeled. Could he trust Cax? Before he could respond, a soft scraping sound came from the ventilation panel. Yuna emerged, her amber eyes locked on Cax. "He's telling the truth," she said softly. "I can see it in his scales." The three stood in tense silence, the weight of their shared secret hanging heavy in the air. Randy looked from Yuna to Cax, realizing that this unlikely alliance could be their only hope for survival and peace. "All right," Randy said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let's talk." "Let's hear your plan," Randy said, gesturing for Cax and Yuna to sit. Over the next hour, the unlikely trio formulated a daring scheme. Cax would use his position on the High Council to arrange a diplomatic shuttle for Randy's supposed return to Earth. Meanwhile, they would disguise Yuna as a human aide, allowing her to accompany Randy off-world. "The technology exists," Cax explained, pulling out a small device. "This holographic projector can mask Yuna's Saurian features, but we'll need to make some physical alterations as well." Randy nodded, turning to Yuna. "Are you prepared for this? It won't be easy." Yuna's scales rippled with tenacity. "I'm ready for anything." Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly to prepare. Randy gave Yuna crash courses in human behavior, teaching her everything from how to walk on two legs to common Earth idioms. Cax procured the necessary equipment and falsified the required documents. As the day of departure approached, Randy and Yuna found themselves spending more time alone together. One evening, as Randy helped adjust Yuna's holographic disguise, their faces drew close. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Randy could feel Yuna's warm breath on his cheek, see the flecks of gold in her amber eyes. Their lips nearly touched before they both pulled back, flustered and confused by the intensity of their feelings. On the morning of their departure, Randy's heart raced as they made their way to the spaceport. Yuna walked beside him, her saurian features hidden beneath the holographic facade of a human woman. Cax led the way, his council credentials granting them swift passage through security checkpoints. As they approached the shuttle, a harsh voice cut through the bustle of the spaceport. "Hold it right there, human." Randy turned to see Zex, the notorious leader of the Saurian extremist faction, flanked by several security officers. Zex's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the group. "I find the timing of your departure suspicious, Tucker. I demand a thorough inspection of your shuttle and all occupants." Cax stepped forward, his scales flushing with indignation. "On what grounds, Zex? This is a sanctioned diplomatic mission." "On the grounds of planetary security," Zex hissed. "Now stand aside." Randy's mind raced as the security officers began their search. He watched, heart in his throat, as one officer approached Una with a retinal scanner. The device hummed as it passed over Una's eyes, then emitted a series of erratic beeps. Thinking quickly, Randy stumbled forward, accidentally knocking over a stack of cargo containers. In the ensuing chaos, Cax managed to access the scanner and manipulate its results. Zex, however, remained unconvinced. "I want DNA tests on all of them," he ordered. Randy felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. A DNA test would instantly expose Una. But before he could protest, Cax stepped in. "Absolutely not," Cax said, drawing himself up to his full height. "As a member of the High Council, I invoke diplomatic immunity for Ambassador Tucker and his aide. Your demand for DNA testing is a clear violation of interspecies protocols." Zex's tail lashed in frustration. "You're overstepping your authority, Cax." As the two Saurians argued, their voices rising, Randy saw his chance. He stepped between them, hands raised placatingly. "Gentlemen, please. I understand your concerns, Zex. How about a compromise? You can conduct a thorough external inspection of our shuttle, but in return you'll waive the DNA test. That should satisfy your security concerns without violating diplomatic procedures." Zex glared at Randy for a long moment before grudgingly nodding. "Fine. But if I find anything suspicious, Tucker, you'll wish you'd never set foot on our world." The inspection seemed to last an eternity. Randy watched nervously as Saurian officers combed every inch of the shuttle's exterior. Finally, finding nothing amiss, Zex was forced to let them board. As the shuttle's engines roared to life, Randy allowed himself a small sigh of relief. They had made it, but their journey was a long way to go. Once in orbit, Randy turned to Una and Cax. "Change of plans," he said. "We're not going to Earth. There's a neutral space station not far from here. We'll seek asylum there and work on building support for peace between our species." Una nodded, her holographic disguise flickering off to reveal her true Saurian features. "It's a risk, but it might be our best chance." As Cax set their new course, Randy and Una found themselves alone in the shuttle's cramped living quarters. The adrenaline of their narrow escape still coursed through their veins, heightening the tension between them. "I thought we were done for back there," Una said softly, her scales shimmering in the dim light. Randy stepped closer, drawn by an irresistible force. "So did I, but we made it, together." Their eyes met, and this time, neither pulled away. As their lips met in a tentative kiss, Randy marveled at the strange, exhilarating sensation of Una's scales against his skin. They explored each other carefully, mindful of their physiological differences, yet eager to discover new forms of intimacy. Their moment of bliss was shattered by Cax's urgent voice over the intercom. "Randy, Una, get up here now. We've got a problem." They rushed to the cockpit where Cax was hunched over the communications array. "I've intercepted a coded message," he said, his voice grim. "Zex's faction knows about our deception. They're coming for us." Before Randy could respond, proximity alarms blared throughout the shuttle. A massive Saurian warship materialized directly in their path, its weapons systems powering up. "It's Zex," Cax said, his scales pale with fear. "He's found us." Randy stared at the looming warship, his mind racing. They were trapped between Zex's forces and the neutral space station, which refused to lower its defensive shields until the situation was will-powered. As alarms continued to sound and the warship grew ever larger in their view screen, Randy knew they had only moments to decide their next move. The fate of their mission, their lives, and perhaps the future of human-Saurian relations hung in the balance. He looked at Una, then at Cax, his voice steady despite the fear gripping his heart. "We need to make a decision. Now." Randy's mind raced as he considered their limited options. The Saurian warship loomed ever closer, its massive silhouette filling the shuttle's view screen. He glanced at Yuna, her scales flickering with anxiety, then at Cax, whose clawed hands hovered over the controls. "We need to force their hand," Randy said, his voice tight. "Cax, activate the emergency distress beacon. Broadcast on all frequencies." Cax hesitated for a moment, then nodded, his scales shimmering with drive. He flipped a series of switches, and a high-pitched whine filled the cockpit as the distress signal pierced the void of space. The effect was immediate. The neutral space station's comm channel crackled to life, a stern voice demanding an explanation for the unauthorized broadcast. Randy leaned forward, his heart pounding. "This is Ambassador Randy Tucker. We are under imminent threat from a Saurian warship and request immediate asylum." Tense seconds ticked by as they waited for a response. Suddenly, the space around their shuttle shimmered, and they felt a gentle tug. The station's shields had expanded, enveloping their small craft in a protective bubble. Yuna let out a relieved hiss. It worked! Their relief was short-lived. The Saurian warship, now forced to halt its approach, began broadcasting threats of its own. Zex's guttural voice filled the cockpit, promising dire consequences if the fugitives weren't handed over. Before they could react, a team of peacekeepers from the station transported aboard their shuttle. The lead peacekeeper, a tall androgynous being with iridescent skin, raised a multifaceted scanner. "We must verify your identities and assess the situation," the peacekeeper announced. Randy nodded, but his stomach clenched as he saw Yuna's holographic disguise begin to flicker. The stress and prolonged use had taken its toll on the technology. He knew they had only moments before her true identity was revealed. Taking a deep breath, Randy stepped forward. "There's something you need to know," he said, gesturing to Yuna. As he spoke, her holographic disguise failed completely, revealing her saurian features. The peacekeepers reacted with surprise, hands moving to their weapons. Randy quickly explained their mission, emphasizing their goal of brokering peace between humans and saurians. The lead peacekeeper listened intently, then nodded. "This is a matter of great complexity. We will grant you temporary asylum while we consult with our superiors." As the peacekeepers escorted them to a secure area of the station, Randy caught glimpses of the diverse alien life forms inhabiting the massive structure. Under different circumstances, he would have been fascinated. They were led to a small, sparsely furnished room. As the door sealed behind them, Randy turned to Yuna and Cax. "We're safe for now, but this is far from finished." Cax nodded grimly. "I'll use my contacts to gather support among the station's population. We need allies if we're going to succeed." As Cax left to begin his diplomatic efforts, Randy found himself alone with Yuna. The close quarters and the intensity of their shared ordeal heightened the tension between them. Yuna's scales shimmered with a mix of emotions Randy was only beginning to decipher. "I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this," Yuna said softly, her amber eyes meeting Randy's. Randy stepped closer, drawn by an irresistible pull. "I never thought I'd meet someone like you," he replied, his voice low. Their lips met tentatively at first, then with growing passion. Randy marveled at the unique sensations, the cool smoothness of Yuna's scales, the subtle alien scent of her skin. They explored each other carefully, mindful of their physiological differences, yet eager to discover new forms of intimacy. Their moment of connection was interrupted by a chime from the room's communication panel. Captain Lyra, the station's commander, appeared on the screen. Her features were avian, with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce through the display. "Ambassador Tucker, we've received demands from both Earth and the Saurian High Council," she announced. "I'm proposing an emergency peace summit here on the station. Your testimony will be crucial." Randy straightened, aware of the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "We'll be ready, Captain." As preparations for the summit began, tensions on the station escalated. Delegates from Earth and the Saurian homeworld arrived, their competing agendas threatening to derail the fragile peace process before it could begin. Randy watched as Admiral Helena Frost, leader of the Earth delegation, strode into the conference room. Her unwavering focus swept over him, a mix of skepticism and curiosity in her eyes. On the other side of the room, High Counselor Thrak led the Saurian contingent, his scales rippling with almost unchecked agitation. Captain Lyra called the summit to order, her voice resonating through the chamber. "We stand at a crossroads," she began. "The choice between conflict and cooperation lies before us." As Randy prepared to testify, he felt Yuna's hand slip into his. Together they stepped forward, ready to share their story and fight for a future where their love could flourish, a future of peace between their people. The delegates leaned forward, their attention fixed on the unlikely couple. Randy took a deep breath, knowing that their next words could change the course of history. History. The room fell silent as Randy opened his mouth to speak, but before he could utter a word, the station shook violently. Alarms blared, and Captain Lyra's voice came over the intercom, her usual calm demeanor tinged with urgency. "Attention all personnel and delegates, we are under attack. Zex's warship has opened fire on the station. Proceed to designated safe zones immediately." Chaos erupted in the conference room. Delegates scrambled for the exits, their faces etched with fear and confusion. Randy grabbed Yuna's hand, pulling her close as he scanned the room for Cax. "We need to find Captain Lyra," Randy shouted over the din. "Come on!" They fought their way through the panicked crowd, Cax falling in behind them. As they raced through the corridors, the station shuddered again, throwing them against the walls. Emergency lights flickered, casting an eerie red glow over everything. They found Captain Lyra in the station's command center, her avian features taut with concentration as she barked orders to her crew. She turned as they entered, her sharp eyes narrowing. "Ambassador Tucker, we need your help," she said, gesturing them over to a bank of monitors. "Zex's attack has caught us off guard. Our shields are weakening, and we have civilians to protect." Randy nodded, his mind racing. "What can we do?" "We need to evacuate the delegates to secure areas and coordinate our defense," Lyra replied. "Your knowledge of both human and Saurian protocols could be invaluable." Without hesitation, Randy, Yuna, and Cax sprang into action. They split up, each taking charge of different aspects of the crisis response. Randy worked with the station's security team to establish safe zones and evacuation routes. Yuna used her understanding of Saurian psychology to calm panicked delegates and prevent stampedes. Cax liaised with the various diplomatic teams, ensuring clear communication amidst the chaos. As they worked, the situation grew increasingly dire. The station's shields flickered dangerously, and reports of hull breaches began to pour in. Randy found himself making split-second decisions, knowing that lives hung in the balance. In a momentary lull, he pulled Yuna and Cax aside. "This can't go on," he said, his voice low and intense. "We need to end this conflict now, before it's too late." Yuna nodded, her scales shimmering with purpose. "But how? Zex won't listen to reason." Randy's eyes lit up as an idea struck him. "We don't need Zex to listen. We need everyone else to hear the truth." He turned to Captain Lyra, who was passing by. "Captain, does the station have a powerful communication array?" Lyra cocked her head, intrigued. "Yes, we have state-of-the-art broadcast capabilities." "Why?" "We're going to tell our story," Randy said, a plan forming in his mind. "To everyone, humans, Saurians, anyone who will listen. We'll expose Zex's plot and show that peace is possible." Cax's scales flushed with excitement. "It's risky, but it might just work. I can help gather support among the delegates." Yuna squeezed Randy's hand. "And I can help craft the message. I know how to speak to my people." Captain Lyra considered for a moment, then nodded sharply. "Do it. I'll have my team prepare the broadcast system." As they rushed to put their plan into action, another explosion rocked the station. Alarms wailed, and a voice came over the intercom. "Hull breach in Section 14. Emergency teams needed immediately." Randy and Yuna exchanged a look. Without a word, they changed course, heading for the nearest storage locker. They quickly donned emergency suits, their movements practiced and efficient. "Be careful," Cax called after them as they headed towards the breach. The scene that greeted them was one of barely controlled chaos. The hull had buckled, leaving a jagged tear in the station's skin. Emergency force fields flickered, struggling to maintain atmospheric integrity. Crew members and volunteers worked frantically to seal the breach and rescue those trapped by debris. Randy and Una plunged into the fray. They worked in perfect sync, anticipating each other's movements as they lifted fallen beams and guided injured personnel to safety. Their teamwork drew admiring glances from humans and saurians alike, a living example of what cooperation between their species could achieve. As they worked, Randy caught glimpses of similar scenes unfolding across the station. Human and saurian delegates, setting aside their differences, fought side by side against Zex's boarding parties. The sight filled him with hope, reinforcing his belief in their mission. Finally, with the immediate crisis under control, they made their way back to the command center. Cax was waiting for them, his scales glowing with excitement. "I've done it," he said, his voice breathless. "I've convinced the key delegates to present a united front. Even Admiral Frost and High Counselor Thrak are on board." Randy grinned, clapping Cax on the shoulder. "Excellent work. Now let's make that broadcast." They gathered around the communication array, tension thick in the air. Randy took a deep breath, looking at Una and Cax. This was their moment, their chance to change everything. "Ready?" he asked. Una nodded, her scales shimmering with a mix of nervousness and persistence. "Ready?" With a final glance at his companions, Randy activated the broadcast. His voice, steady and clear, rang out across the stars. "People of Earth, citizens of the Saurian Empire, this is Ambassador Randy Tucker. We come to you in a time of crisis, with a message of hope." As Randy spoke, weaving their story with hard evidence of Zex's treachery, Una added her voice, her words resonating with Saurian cultural touchstones. They shared footage of humans and Saurians working together to defend the station, showcasing the potential for cooperation. The broadcast continued, their message of unity and peace spreading across the galaxy. As they spoke, they could only hope that their words would be enough to turn the tide of conflict and usher in a new era of understanding between their peoples. As their broadcast concluded, Randy and Una exchanged a look of hope and purpose. The station's communications array fell silent, and for a moment it seemed as if the entire galaxy held its breath. Then reports began flooding in. Across human and Saurian territories, their message was spreading like wildfire. Protests against the war erupted on both homeworlds, with citizens demanding an end to the conflict. Even aboard Zex's warship, crew members were laying down their arms, refusing to continue the assault. The immediate crisis averted, Randy and Una found themselves thrust into the spotlight. As the dust settled and the station's repairs began, they became the focal point of an intense media frenzy. Their relationship, once a closely guarded secret, was now the subject of fascination and debate across both species. Captain Lyra approached them, her avian features set in a serious expression. "Ambassador Tucker, Una, I've received requests from countless news outlets for interviews. The public is clamoring for more information about you two." Randy glanced at Una, seeing his own mix of trepidation and dedication reflected in her amber eyes. "We knew this might happen," he said softly. "Are you ready for this?" Una nodded, her scales shimmering with a mix of emotions. "If it helps bring our people together, then yes, we must do this." Over the next few days, Randy and Una participated in a whirlwind of public appearances and interviews. They sat before cameras of various shapes and sizes, fielding questions from journalists of dozens of species. Each time, they recounted their story, addressing the challenges and joys of their interspecies relationship with candor and grace. During one particularly intense interview, a human reporter leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Ambassador Tucker, how do you reconcile the physiological differences between yourself and Una? Surely there must be complications." Randy felt Una's hand tighten in his. He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Of course there are differences, but we've found that those differences are far less important than what we share. Our feelings, our hopes, our dreams, those transcend biology." Una nodded, adding, "We've had to overcome cultural misunderstandings and initial prejudices, but in doing so, we've grown closer and learned so much about each other's species." Their openness sparked widespread discussions about the nature of love and compatibility across species lines. Forums and social media platforms buzzed with debates, while academics began publishing papers on the sociological implications of human-saurian relationships. As public interest grew, Randy and Yuna were approached by a group of xenobiologists and medical professionals. Dr. Ilara Chen, a renowned human geneticist, presented them with an intriguing proposal. We believe that understanding the biological compatibility between humans and saurians could be crucial for the future of both species coexistence, Dr. Chen explained. We'd like to conduct a study with you two as our primary subjects. Randy and Yuna exchanged a long look, silently communicating their thoughts and concerns. Finally, Randy turned back to Dr. Chen. What exactly would this study involve? Non-invasive tests and examinations, Dr. Chen assured them. We'd analyze your physiological responses to each other, conduct genetic comparisons, that sort of thing. Nothing invasive or dangerous, I promise. After careful consideration and many private discussions, Randy and Yuna agreed to participate. Over the following weeks, they underwent a battery of tests. They provided blood samples, underwent brain scans while in each other's presence, and participated in a series of physiological response tests. As the preliminary results came in, Dr. Chen could barely contain her excitement. The similarities in your reproductive systems are remarkable, she explained, pointing to a series of complex diagrams. There are differences, of course, but the basic structures and functions are surprisingly compatible. It suggests that successful interbreeding might actually be possible. The implications of this discovery sent shockwaves through both human and saurian communities. While many celebrated the news as a sign of hope for future integration, others reacted with outrage and fear. Conservative factions on both sides began vocal campaigns against interspecies relationships. Human supremacist groups decried what they saw as a threat to the purity of their race, while traditionalist saurians warned of the dilution of their ancient bloodlines. In the face of this backlash, Randy and Yuna stood firm. They continued their public appearances, now armed with scientific data to support their relationship. They became living symbols of unity and progress, their love a defiant statement against bigotry and fear. As the controversy raged, preparations for the historic peace treaty signing continued. Cax and Admiral Frost, working tirelessly behind the scenes, had established a framework for ongoing cooperation between humans and saurians. Their crowning achievement was the proposal for a joint human-saurian colony on a neutral planet. We want you two to be among the first residents, Admiral Frost told Randy and Yuna during a private meeting. Your presence would be invaluable in setting the tone for the colony. Randy felt a surge of excitement at the prospect. He looked at Yuna, seeing his own enthusiasm mirrored in her eyes. What do you think? He asked. Ready for another adventure? Yuna's scales rippled with joy. A new world, a fresh start for both our peoples. Yes, I think we're ready. As they began to plan for their role in the new colony, reports of a new threat emerged. A radical group of human supremacists, opposed to the very idea of peace with the saurians, had launched a series of attacks on key diplomatic targets. Intelligence suggested that their ultimate goal was to assassinate Randy and Yuna. Captain Lyra summoned them to a secure briefing room, her expression grave. We've received credible threats against your lives, she informed them. We need to move you to a safe location immediately. Within hours, Randy and Yuna found themselves whisked away to a hidden safe house deep within the station. A joint task force of human and saurian security personnel stood guard, their presence a testament to the growing cooperation between the species. Despite the danger, Randy and Yuna refused to be silenced. They used secure communication channels to broadcast messages of unity and hope to their supporters. Their words, tinged with defiance in the face of threat, only served to strengthen the determination of those working towards peace. In the quiet moments between broadcasts and security briefings, Randy and Yuna found their relationship deepening further. The constant threat of danger made every moment together precious, intensifying their emotional connection. One night, as they lay together in the safe house's small bedroom, Yuna turned to Randy, her eyes shimmering in the low light. Randy, she said softly, have you ever thought about children? Randy's heart skipped a beat. He propped himself up on one elbow, looking into Yuna's eyes. You mean us having children? Together? Yuna nodded, her scales flushing with a mix of nervousness and hope. The xenobiologist's findings, they suggest it might be possible. I know it's complicated and maybe even dangerous, but Randy gently caressed Yuna's face, marveling at the smooth coolness of her scales. It's more than complicated, he said. It's unprecedented, possibly risky, but, he added, a smile spreading across his face, if anyone could make it work, it's us. As they began to seriously discuss the possibility of starting a family, their conversations about the future became intertwined with their hopes for lasting peace between their peoples. They imagined a world where their child, a living bridge between species, could grow up without fear or prejudice. Their dreams of the future, however, were tempered by the very real dangers of the present. As the day of the peace treaty signing drew near, intelligence reports indicated that the human supremacist group was planning a major attack on the ceremony. In a secure conference room, Randy, Yuna, Cax, and Admiral Frost gathered to discuss strategies for ensuring the safety of all delegates. The atmosphere was tense, the weight of responsibility heavy on all their shoulders. "We can't postpone the signing," Admiral Frost said firmly. "It would send the wrong message, make us appear weak." Cax nodded in agreement, his scales rippling with concern. "But we can't ignore the threat either. The extremists are growing bolder by the day." Randy had been quiet, his mind racing through possibilities. Suddenly he straightened, an idea taking shape. "What if," he said slowly, "we use ourselves as bait?" "Bait," Randy finished, his eyes gleaming with willpower. The room fell silent as the others considered his words. Yuna's scales shimmered with a mix of concern and admiration. "You mean, use ourselves to draw out the attackers?" Randy nodded, squeezing Yuna's hand. "Exactly. We make our presence at the signing known, even publicize it. The extremists won't be able to resist the opportunity." Admiral Frost leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "It's risky, Ambassador. We can't guarantee your safety." "No plan is without risk," Cax interjected, his tail swishing thoughtfully. "But if we can control the battlefield, we might just have a chance." As they hashed out the details of the plan, tension mounted. Security teams were briefed, contingencies were put in place, and the stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of human-saurian relations. The day of the treaty signing arrived with a palpable sense of anticipation. Randy and Yuna stood side by side on the platform, their presence a beacon of unity in the face of division. The crowd before them was a sea of faces, human and saurian alike, all watching with nervous excitement. As Admiral Frost began her opening remarks, Randy's keen eyes scanned the crowd. He spotted several figures moving with purpose, their hands concealed beneath bulky jackets. He gave a subtle nod to Yuna, who tensed beside him. Suddenly, chaos erupted. The human supremacist group revealed themselves, energy weapons flaring to life. Security forces sprang into action, but the attackers had the element of surprise. Randy and Yuna didn't hesitate. They leapt from the platform, years of training kicking in as they moved in perfect synchronization. Randy's human agility complemented Yuna's saurian strength as they fought side by side. The battle raged around them, a deadly dance of energy blasts and hand-to-hand combat. Human and saurian security teams worked together, their coordination a testament to the very unity the extremists sought to destroy. In the midst of the chaos, Randy spotted the group's leader taking aim at Yuna. Time seemed to slow as he saw the malice in the attacker's eyes, the energy weapon powering up for a lethal shot. Without a second thought, Randy threw himself in front of Yuna. The energy blast caught him in the shoulder, sending him spinning to the ground. Pain seared through his body, but his only thought was for Yuna's safety. Yuna's roar of rage echoed across the battlefield. Her eyes blazed with fury as she launched herself at the attacker. Her movements were a blur, scales gleaming as she disarmed the leader with a series of lightning-fast strikes. The tide of the battle turned. Inspired by Yuna's ferocity and Randy's sacrifice, the security forces redoubled their efforts. Within minutes, the remaining extremists were subdued. As the last echoes of combat faded, Yuna rushed to Randy's side. His face was pale, his breathing labored. "You foolish, brave human," she whispered, cradling his head. Medical teams converged on them, whisking Randy away to a nearby hospital. Una refused to leave his side, her scaled hand clasped tightly around his as they sped through the streets. In the stark white halls of the medical facility, a joint team of human and saurian doctors worked tirelessly. Their voices were hushed, their movements precise as they fought to stabilize Randy's condition. As the hours ticked by, Una paced outside the operating room. Her scales rippled with worry, her tail lashing back and forth. Admiral Frost and Cax arrived, their faces etched with concern. "Any news?" Admiral Frost asked, her usual stern demeanor softened by genuine worry. Una shook her head, her voice tight. "Nothing yet. They're still working on him." Just then the door swung open. Dr. Chen emerged, her face a mix of exhaustion and excitement. "He's stable," she announced, "but that's not all. We've made an incredible discovery." She led them to a room filled with holographic displays of Randy's physiology. His prolonged intimate contact with Una has caused subtle changes in his cellular structure, Dr. Chen explained, pointing to various readouts. It's made him more resilient to the energy weapon's effects. If he hadn't had this adaptation, the blast would have been fatal. Una's eyes widened, her scales flushing with a mix of relief and amazement. "You mean our relationship saved his life?" Dr. Chen nodded, her eyes shining with the thrill of scientific discovery. "Exactly. This could revolutionize our understanding of human saurian biology." As the implications of this discovery began to sink in, a groan from the nearby bed drew their attention. Randy's eyes fluttered open, focusing on Una's face. "Did we win?" he asked, his voice weak but determined. Una laughed, a sound of pure joy and relief. "Yes, my love, we won." News of Randy's heroic act and the groundbreaking medical discovery spread rapidly. Public opinion, already leaning towards unity, solidified into a groundswell of support for human-saurian cooperation. As Randy recovered, the peace treaty signing was rescheduled. This time, the event was marked not just by political speeches, but by a celebration of the love and sacrifice that had made peace possible. 2 months later, Randy stood on the platform once again, his arm still in a sling, but his spirit unbroken. Una stood beside him, her scales shimmering with pride and love. As they watched the treaty being signed, Randy knew that this was just the beginning of their journey together.
If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.